Before I ever appeared on the Jon Stewart show, my daughter told me years ago, when she was just a little older than you, that more people in her generation got their news from Jon Stewart than from the network news. At first I thought it sounded a little weird. But I can tell you now, I have been on Jon Stewart's show to talk about 2 of the 3 books I've written since I left the White House. He clearly had read them. He knew what the facts were. He had been well briefed. And every other time I've been on there, he really seemed to me to have put in more time and more preparation to ask more serious questions while poking a little fun at me along the way than anybody else who interviewed me. In short, he's done what we need to do more of in our schools. He makes learning fun, and it's still learning. Please welcome Jon Stewart.
Thank you very much. Hello. How are you guys? How are you? It's an absolute honor to be here. You know, it's funny as I see. Oh, what do you got? Signs? I cannot read them in any way. You know, I'm in the light, but you're in the dark, so I really. This is an honor. You know, as I went over a lot of the projects that these kids are doing from around the world, I can't help but think how much they remind me of me when I was their age. And I guess just the commitment and the dedication and I can't tell you how incredibly impressed I am with the work that you guys are doing and with the enthusiasm that you bring to it and the passion and the ingenuity. And I made a bong out of an apple once, and I just know how difficult it can be now. And now I know I should have used bamboo, because clearly that's how you win. That's how you get prizes. But I'm honored to be here, and to, you know, President Clinton is being very modest. He could have taken the route that some ex-presidents take. You do a couple of speaking engagements, and you get yourself a nice little manor and a pool and you know, the whole thing. But his commitment to changing the world and to making conditions better around it has been very inspiring. So I just wanted to thank you for everything that you've done as well. And it's exciting.
I mean, I got a better deal. Don't you think? I get to hang out with them.
It is kind of exciting.
Keeps me young, as long as I don't look in the mirror.
So what have you? So you've been here now. You've spent the weekend. You've been doing the CGI for a while. What did you learn this weekend from interacting with the students here and with some of the projects that they're doing? What did you take away from it?
Well, 2 things. One is we had the largest number of non-American students here, people who are citizens of other countries. Many go to school in the United States. Some go to school around the world and came all the way from where they are in school. And I learned all over again that all these young people, partly because of the social media and internet communication generally, have a much more global perspective on a person-to-person basis than any generation before. The second thing I learned is that every year their commitments are getting better. That is, they are thinking of things that they can do, that they really can do. And they understand that, and they don't overpromise. That is, these guys could have promised they were going to build 24,000 bicycles instead of 24, but they know
Right.
they can build 24.
Right. Shaking his head.
And if they understand that the power of their ideas will rest in part on either other people replicating what they have done or putting money into what they're doing so it can be done everywhere else. But they think about things that they can actually do that will not only help the people they set out to help, but could help other people. And that, I think, is really important. I mentioned when we opened, that a couple years ago, a commitment was made that I confess I didn't notice at the time, and I'm surprised because I care about it, by an undergraduate at Vanderbilt who's now graduated, to train people who've been sent to prison when they're released from prison, but they're not yet free. They go to halfway houses as a transition period.
Right.
And he offered them training in making shirts and marketing, handling the inventory. And they're upscale good shirts, so people would buy them without knowing this. And he knew he could do it for 20 people. So that's what he promised. But the point is, if every college in America had a similar plan to train ex-inmates, the repeater rate would go way down. And the chronic long-term unemployment rate would be positively affected. Because even though we like to say we're a country of second chances and almost everybody who goes to prison is going to get out, the truth is that most people are expected to wear some sort of scarlet letter around their neck for the rest of their lives, and it's nuts. We should try to put these people back into productive life in America. So that's the sort of thing that we see them do.
Is there a plan in any way to get, you've got CGIU, and it has taken off as its own separate entity. Is there a plan to integrate this into the larger initiative where business leaders, people that have taken on commitments on a larger scale, can come in and steal and exploit their ideas?
Yeah.
Wait, that was subtext. Hold on.
Well, actually,
But that they can interact with so that they can get a sense of where those ideas are going to go.
last year I started having a separate meeting with the non-American students.
Mm-hmm.
They have a lunch, and I just go by and answer questions for 45 minutes or so. So I did that today. For the very first time, one of those students asked me the same question: can we graduate our ideas up to CGI? And we are also having, in June in Chicago, our second CGI Just for America to try to help grow jobs in America, which I promise to hold until we return to a full employment economy. So what I'm going to do when all of you go home is take all the commitments and figure out which ones we could present at either CGI America as things that would create jobs in our country if someone would support them, and try to get some of the people who are there to finance them, or take them to CGI in New York in September. That's a really good idea. And I'm embarrassed that we got all the way to the 5th CGIU, and I never thought about it, but you're always one step ahead of me.
So you think these kids are thinking when they get out of college they'd like to be employed? Because that's, doesn't work that way anymore. It's a different world out there. What do you see, you're doing this 5 years. You've been, quote unquote, the most powerful man in the world, the ability to affect change. What's the difference in the ability to affect change through an NGO, through the types of student commitments that you see through this, and through governmental action? Because I find that there has been an erosion of confidence in government's ability to engage its own corruption, create change in the way you want, and yet there's been an enormous energy towards these NGOs, towards these smaller groups. What's been your experience on both sides of it?
Well, first, when I took office as president, confidence in government was very low because the economy was weak. And inequality was growing, and we had a lot of problems. When I left office, because we had a lot of jobs, because it was the first time, the only time now in more than 40 years when the bottom 20%'s earnings increased in percentage terms as much as the top 20%, and 100 times as many people moved out of poverty as in the previous 12 years. There was a big increase in confidence in government. So I think the level of confidence in government pretty much tracks people's sense of well-being and whether they can, by effort and work, do better. But there is a big difference. If you're president, in theory, you're handling more money and you can direct it to more places. You can help more people. For example, we gave out 2 million micro-enterprise loans a year in poor countries in Africa, East Asia, and Latin America. But you also have to deal with all the things that you didn't expect to deal with, like the incoming fire, the Bosnia, Kosovo, and so, and you have to go through both Congress and bureaucracies and deal with resistances in foreign countries. If you run a foundation, or you're like them with their ideas, you wake up and you start with one thing, and you just see how far you can walk it out, how big you can make it. So we started out with a very modest proposal with AIDS drugs, and now in our foundation we negotiated contracts that get 4 million people, about half all the people in poor countries in the world, the least expensive, high-quality AIDS medicines. So I think that in some ways, running a foundation, any kind of non-governmental work, gives you more flexibility, more creativity, more ability to build from the ground up. It's hard to help as many people as you can help if you're president, if things are going well, and you're not spending all your time trying to bail out a boat. But it is immensely personally rewarding because you get to, for example, a couple years ago I visited this reforestation project we were running in Malawi through a young Malawian university graduate. We were in an area where the incomes were less than $1 a day, where the kids never went to school, but the people all chose in these 3 different villages different kinds of trees they wanted to plant to get their carbon credits, and then decided that they would keep only 55% of their income and give the other 45% to their fellow villagers to get them in the system. They had this sense that they needed to plant more trees. They wanted to reverse global warming. They wanted to preserve agriculture. It took me an hour and a half to drive about 11 miles, 18 kilometers on this road to get there, but it was worth all the money in the world to me to see one more time in one of the poorest places on earth, and one that was hard to reach, and one where people didn't know who I was from Adam. I guess they knew I wasn't Adam. I don't look that old. That intelligence, intelligence and effort and actual social consciousness in a way are pretty well evenly distributed, but investment and opportunity aren't. And it's a real inspiration to keep hitting it.
I want to ask you, you brought up Malawi. I think it brings up, you're going to do a CGI just for America. There's a sense that, we got to do all these global initiatives. We've got to help people in Malawi and in areas that are, quote unquote, third world and underdeveloped. And, a friend of mine runs something called the Global Portrait Project. They connect kids in different communities to each other through the internet and classrooms and things of that nature. And they connected kids in Haiti with kids in Harlem. And the idea was through art for them to learn an understanding of each other. And they were stunned because the project upset the kids in Harlem, because they felt from everything that they had heard and read that their lives were going to be far superior. And this is post-earthquake, and this is kids in Haiti that had been hit really hard. But what they found was the kids in Harlem were suffering really badly as well. And so what do you do about, in so-called developed countries, the intractable social problems of poverty, and how do you attack them in the same creative ways that you can in countries like Haiti?
Well, first, in my mind, the 2 problems, I don't think we have to or we should choose one over the other. That is, the United States does not spend a high percentage of its income on foreign assistance and foreign development. If you ask people what we should spend, they say, all the polls show, let's say between 5 and 15% of the budget. If you say, well, what do we spend? They say, 25% of the budget. Truth is, we spend 1% of the budget.
You're saying people are sometimes misinformed.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, these numbers have not changed for 20 years. And it doesn't matter how many times somebody like me says it, we can say it till we're blue in the face. People are sort of pre-programmed somehow to think we are putting all this money into foreign assistance in America when we aren't. So since we live in an interdependent world, since we need more customers, since America has only about 12% of its GDP tied to exports, as compared with Germany, the #1 country in the world, which has over 25%. They do even better than Japan. We need to widen the circle of opportunity, particularly in places like Africa that feel a special tie to us. On the other hand, I think that we need to go back and take a whack at American poverty too, much harder. I personally believe we should reinvigorate the empowerment zones and grants. I know the president has proposed this. And I proposed at the end of my term, and we passed a bill to try to make it possible for every area in the country that had an unemployment rate above the national average or an income rate below to get special investments. The poorest communities in America are still the Native American communities that have no gambling. I think every one of them should become a center for solar and wind power that's west of the Mississippi. They have lots of money. And all we have to do is build a transmission line sufficient to carry the power back to the urban areas. That's one real problem. America, for the Americans here, we rank first or second in the world in every survey of potential to generate electricity from the sun and the wind. Every single one. The problem is that with the exception of California and a few other places, the sun shines brightest and the wind blows hardest where the people aren't. We have 140 separate electrical grids that are connected. So, for example, if we're about to have a brownout in Washington, D.C., in theory, they could wheel power all the way from California to us. But as you go from one system to the other, you lose a lot of power. A lot of the distribution systems are inefficient. And like in Wyoming, they're building a big wind farm now, and the people building the wind farm are having to build their own transmission lines to connect it to urban areas in California. So this is a huge deal. If we could just simply do that, if the government could do that, solar power now has gotten about as cheap as wind power. It won't be forever, but there's been a lot of overproduction, and we could do that. We could revolutionize the lives of Native Americans in a way that allowed them to be self-supporting, diversify their economies, and lift themselves out of poverty. The same thing is true in the Mississippi Delta. The same thing is true in Appalachia. The same thing is true in a lot of inner cities. The other thing I would say is one of the things I do in Harlem, Oakland, and a number of other cities is run a mentorship program for people running inner city businesses with Inc. magazine. They pick their most successful small business people, and they come and help our folks. And they help them on market surveys, on inventory management. You'd be amazed when I started this, how many businesses we had in Harlem that still hadn't computerized their records. Right. And didn't know how to really manage their inventory and hadn't sort of measured the changes in markets. So they're no different than people anywhere. They're perfectly intelligent enough to make the most of the modern world if they know what their options are and they know what the benefits are. That's what I think is important. And I'm not surprised, trust me, most people living in Haiti are still much worse off. We still got 500,000 people living in tents there, although we're moving them out pretty fast. But the Haitians are incredibly gifted, creative, intelligent, hardworking people who have never had a government or a society worthy of them.
So if you're going in when you're first starting to sort of unravel some of these issues and trying to empower local populations, you were going to rank where you needed to attack first. Is it order? Is it corruption? Is it health? Is it all three at once? Do you have to focus on, when you are stepping into an area and you want to unleash the type of creativity that you see here and in those communities, you have a hierarchy of issues that you feel like you have to walk through to get to that point?
Yes, but it depends really. I've looked at them in three baskets if you're going into a developing society. Mm-hmm. First of all, the number one thing everybody in the world wants is a decent job that pays a decent income. They want a predictable income that will enable them to support a family and raise their kids in dignity. And they'll solve a lot of the other problems if they have that. But you also need to help them build systems that make good behavior have predictable possible consequences, which is why predictable positive consequences, which is why I work on building school systems and healthcare systems and water systems and energy systems. And to get all that done and make it work, you've got to have honest, transparent government that is also capable of providing security to the people. So I see it in those three baskets. Then I ask myself, what can I do the most on? So in Haiti, for example, I worked first on bringing investment in, second on helping get money for healthcare systems and school systems and energy systems, and third on supporting the United Nations peacekeeping force and trying to get order, and in working with the donors to Haiti to put every single red cent that went through the commission that I co-chaired on the internet. Here's how much Canada gave, here's who got it, here's what they're supposed to do, and when it's over, you'll get a performance and an accounting audit. All that, I think, is really important. And meanwhile, we have to have governments that are willing to give money to the Haitian government to rebuild its capacity. But you need to think of it in those three areas, and not every person will have the ability, and even me, you know, when I have a pretty wide portfolio and reach, I can't do all three of those things in all the countries. So if, let's say we have an enormously gifted group of people, over 1,000 of them, working all over the world in increasing health access. I still won't go into any country unless the government invites us and signs a strict no corruption pledge. I don't ask them not to have corruption in some area I'm not working in, because I'm not president anymore. I don't have any control over that. But if somebody pays $500 for my $60 medicine that keeps children alive for a year in AIDS, that will be known in 72 hours in some other country where people don't have the $500. So if it happens there, you'll have 7 or 8 kids die for every one life we save. So I think the best thing that NGOs that are actually wanted by governments can do is to say, when you're dealing with us, there has to be a no corruption pledge, and we have to be able to enforce it, and we have to be able to monitor it and report on it. I think it's really important.
Right. Now, has there been something that you've seen through CGI through the last 5 years that has had, pound for pound, the most impact in terms of when you look back and you think of a program, an initiative, a commitment that, for what was put into it, gave you the results in a powerful way?
Well, there are, I can't say one over the other, but I can say that a lot of these, all these programs that the students do, the ones that helped people in America and did what they were supposed to do, probably had the most immediate impact, like students that went home and organized the greening of their own campuses, maximized the retrofits of all the buildings, had more, bicycles on the campuses instead of cars, recycled all the waste, did all that stuff. That's something where you can actually say, here we are, here we're a model in America, and we proved it was economical and it didn't raise your tuition. Instead, it lowered the utility bill of the college. That's an example of something that has a comprehensive impact. On the other hand, a lot of these commitments, again, what we've got to do, and I need to help do a better job of getting other people to recognize their potential. Like we talked a little about the socket ball, where one of our committees a couple years ago said, designed a soccer ball that would actually capture the heat energy driven into a soccer ball during a hot soccer match on a hot day on a hot field, and then it can be used actually to run lights in a village hut.
You just take the soccer ball and you plug it into a socket, and then
that's why
can
it's
you
called,
eat it as well? Is there a whole other?
It's
based
called
it. And,
socket, but it was an interesting idea because it was a way of turning human heat energy into usable energy. So that's the kind of thing that I would like to see done. I think this bamboo bike, the winner here, if you think of all the places in the world that can grow bamboo and where it grows and what it could be, what it could do to reduce all kinds of other environmental problems, it has staggering potential. So what I think we need to do is to do more to try to take these things to scale. And it may be that the only way to do it is to take those that have proved extraordinarily successful and take them to CGI and say, instead of thinking of a new commitment, how about funding some of these?
right. Okay, how many people do you think coupled up this weekend? Just ballpark. I'm just asking for a ballpark, just a little, throw it out there. I think about 100. Sorry. Getting back to the, there's disease and poverty we were talking about.
One of my promises to myself in my old age is that I'm going to try to find an opportunity every day for the rest of my life, even if I'm just saying it to myself, to say either I don't know or I was wrong. This is a great thing. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. What have you come up, I'm always surprised at your ability to be tenacious, your ability to approach these issues that are seemingly intractable. Has your commitment ever wavered? Has your commitment ever been challenged in a way that, not necessarily dark night of the soul, but that you've thought to yourself, I just can't keep banging my head against this wall? Because everybody's going to face it with the type of idealistic solutions that they're looking for. They're going to come up against seemingly intractable issues.
Well, the closest I came, I think, was after the financial crisis in 2009. And my foundation, I didn't have any private wealth when I left the White House. I was in debt. So everything I do with my foundation comes from other people's contributions. Thankfully, I make enough money now where I can give money to the foundation too every year, but I didn't for a long time, and it's nowhere near enough to run it. And so we had a bad year in 2009, and I couldn't blame anybody. I mean, I had people who were giving me $1 million or more a year who lost 75% of their net worth overnight. And we had saved a small endowment, and I do mean small, about $27 million, and we basically had a decision to make. Are you going to just shut down what you're doing in Ethiopia, where I had hundreds and hundreds of employees trying to build clinics for people, because people are still dying anonymously in Ethiopia because they just live out there somewhere and there are no clinics? Or are you going to bet that you can come back and blow what you saved? And I chose the latter course. And I thought, boy, if this sucker doesn't turn around, I am one dead duck, because there is no way I'll ever be able to do this. And I was really worried. I was afraid, I could have another health problem, something could happen. I got all these people's jobs depending on me, all these lives depending on me. And what if I make the wrong call here? Maybe I should cut back now. And instead I decided to roll the dice and try for one more year, and it worked out fine. But that was hard. And then, when you work at something and it doesn't work, that's tough. I had a much more ambitious plan trying to turn around businesses in inner city areas and help them hire more people. We started off with a whole strategy to get them McKinsey-like consulting services across the board. And it was highly expensive per business, even though Booz Allen, one of our sponsors, and the Black MBA Association and the African American Property Managers Association, others were helping us. It just didn't work. And one of the businesses I helped to start failed, and I was personally involved with it. And I'm not big on, I hate to fail, especially when somebody else gets hurt. So those things are hard, but you just have to go on. You got to figure out how you're going to keep score. If you're going to keep score in a way that if you ever lose, you failed, then you shouldn't play. The only thing that matters is whether somebody's better off when you quit than when you started. And so that's what matters. But it's hard. Now, I don't ever wish, I were sitting on an island in the Florida Keys somewhere, going to play golf and drinking pina coladas. Because this is fun for me. I do this. This is the most selfish thing I do. I love bringing all these young people here. I love listening to their ideas. I love it. So I feel like I should pay for the privilege of doing it. I mean, it's fun. So it's not that. It's just that when you have more yesterdays than tomorrows, you just hate to fail. You just hate to. But you just have to keep, that's part of the human condition. You just got to keep up and banging your head against the wall and pushing the rocks up the hill. Sometimes I get there.
Well, I think what I took away from that is President Bill Clinton is going to start paying all of you for this privilege. I think that's what I took from this. Now, here's what I want to do. So we've got all these students gathered. We've got all this energy. I want to open it up to them, give them an opportunity to ask some questions of you, some ideas that they have. So I think we've got some things set up.
I give you permission to ask questions of him.
I will lie to you. President Bill Clinton will not. I will. All right, so we've got some. I'm just going to see if I can get under the light a little bit to get. Is there someone right there who's got a question?
There's some people over here.
Oh, here we go, right here. There you go. Right through there. If you can, just state your name and then whatever your question is.
Hi, my name is Izzy. I'm actually a student here at GW. And I was just wondering what continues to inspire you despite the fact that there's so many problems out there. So what should we continue to focus on? What continues to inspire you to do the great work that you do? And it's to both of you.
I tell you what inspires me the most is two things. One is the whole CGI network. The CGI in September, CGIU, CGI for America. There seems to be an almost unlimited number of people who care about other people and find meaning in life by doing something that helps other people do what they ought to do. I mean, you couldn't come here and listen to your ideas without being inspired. The other thing that inspires me is when I go out in the world and actually see the people that we're working with. I'll just give you one simple example. When I made my Africa trip a couple years ago, in addition to this climate change trip, I stopped to see one of our farm projects. And we have agriculture products in Malawi and Rwanda. And I grew up in a farming state. I lived on a farm when I was a little boy. I love agriculture, and I know farmers are equally intelligent everywhere in the world. And they're pretty good environmentalists in general. Family farmers take good care of the land and make the most of whatever water they have. So we're meeting with these 11 farmers. And we were in Tanzania then, rural Tanzania. And they picked one, and these people have little farms, average 1 or 2 acres. They picked one person to be the spokesperson, the only woman. She was a widow with a 13-year-old son. Her sole asset was a 1/4 acre of land. In the previous year, she had made $80. She and her son lived on $80 for a year. So we come in and give them better fertilizer and feed and seed, and we take their products to market. You know, the average African farmer loses 1/2 of his or her income every year paying someone to take the food to market because none of them have the vehicles. It's scandalous. So we take the food to market. This woman made $400 the first year we worked with her. Her income went up fivefold, right? That's no money. That's less than $2 a day. But to her, she was relatively rich because it was 5 times more than she had the year before. And I said, well, what's the best thing about it? She said, my 13-year-old son, he finally got to go to school because in poor countries with no revenue base, they actually have to pay tuition for their kids to go to school. So this woman was sending her kid to school. Now, I'm about to go to Vienna to the oldest AIDS fundraising initiative in Europe, the AIDS Life Ball. And they support my foundation every year. And so I go over there. And every year I see this couple who run along with a group of Catholic nuns and one Catholic priest from Brooklyn, an orphanage in Cambodia that they support and I support. We provide the pediatric AIDS medicine that keep 320 plus kids alive. And my second book, Giving, the only picture in it's me holding this 9-year-old boy, who's 9-month-old boy, whose parents had both died of AIDS. His father before he was born and his mother slightly after he was born, being raised as an orphan. And he was about to die. He got this medicine. So about a year later, somebody in California who worked at the orphanage came out to me when I was doing a book signing and said, I see you got Basil's picture here. Here he is now. And they had a picture of him with all the other kids. He's 2, looking good. Then I go to the AIDS Life Ball year before last. They give me a picture of Basil at 5, looking good. I know when I go back this time, I'm going to get another picture of this Cambodian kid. He doesn't know me, but he's alive. That's the most meaningful thing in the world to me. God only knows what this kid will make of his life, but I know he's going to have a chance. That would keep you going.
All right. Let's get someone else over here. If you're asking me, I would just say ditto. All right. Yes, right here. And then we'll go over that way. Yeah, we'll get you guys.
Right. So my group and I, we just went to the Navajo Nation, and we found out that 80% of each dollar is actually spent off reservation, and most power generated on the reservation and 2 big coal-fired plants only goes to LA and Las Vegas. So what can we do to help develop these extremely poor global areas in the United States?
Well, first of all, I'll go back to the energy. Every Indian reservation in the West. You're a Navajo?
you?
Good for you.
You think anyone else is going to shout, Las Vegas? Oh, wait, no, that's not. Yeah, that's not a figure. All right.
Hey, I went to the reservation in Window Rock, and you know where it is? So I went to visit to highlight this very problem you're talking about in my last term as president, where there was a young 13-year-old student who had won this great contest, and her prize was her very own personal computer. Except in her home, she didn't have an electrical outlet to plug in the computer. So my first suggestion is, right now, solar panels are the cheapest they've ever been because this is actually what caused the failure of the famous Solyndra company. They were designing a solar panel that was actually cylindrical like this and had a higher efficiency conversion rate, but cost more than twice as much as the average photovoltaic. Like all electrical products, they go down in price as the volume sold goes up. So they knew they were going to lose money for 4 or 5 years, so they needed this loan. And that's why the Energy Department gave it to them, because it was technologically so much more efficient. Then after they did that, the Chinese came in and offered $32 billion more in solar subsidies, which immediately collapsed the market, especially for the less efficient Chinese products. So that's what happened. So instead of looking at a 4-year time loss, they were looking at a 10-year time loss. And nobody was willing to wait that long. That's really what happened. Okay, so as a result of that, these panels are cheap. I personally believe that federal government ought to have an initiative, and local NGOs ought to help to make every one of these reservations at least self-sufficient with decentralized power. Photovoltaics do the same thing for electricity that cell phones do for communication. And every one of these buildings on every reservation in the United States that will efficiently handle it should have solar power. Every one of them that can generate wind power on site should have wind power, and then you can have a simple battery that'll give you a day or two storage if the wind doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine. And then I believe that they ought to be able to export power. And if they own coal plants, it's okay if they sell it, but the problem is they probably don't get much benefit from it. I don't know, it depends on what the agreement was when they gave permission to build a plant on the site. But energy independence would be a good place to start with diversifying the income of the Native American reservations.
Let's try over here. Sir, right there? Yes, sir. You gotta get him the mic there. There you go.
My name is Idris Bello from the University of Oxford in the UK. My question is regarding Africa. Since President Bill Clinton pays a lot of visits to Africa, and I know most of the leaders there, past and present, hold you in high regard. So is there a way to scale up your efforts, the kind of work you do here, by encouraging those presidents, when they leave power, to actually engage in similar initiatives to support their people?
Yeah.
Someone hit a nerve.
You know, there's now a program funded by a Somali billionaire who made a lot of money in the cell phone business to actually give cash stipends to former presidents who were honest when in office and wish to do public service when they get out of office. It's a great idea. And I actually keep in touch with, for example, every year at the CGI, almost every year, at least two former African presidents, Obasanjo from Nigeria and Rawlings from Ghana, come. But a number of others, and you know, Ghana's got a pretty good record. They keep rolling over people with elections. That's pretty good. And Senegal, President Wade finally admitted that he lost the last election, which was a good thing. They had an honest election in Senegal because they're doing very well on most indicators. Anyway, I would like to do that. I have done work in Zambia with probably the most respected African former leader next to Mandela on the continent, Kenneth Kaunda. We do work in AIDS education and prevention together. But I think it's a good idea, and maybe I should try to do it more systematically, because a lot of those people are still very vigorous, very interested. And of course, before Mr. Mandela got so frail, I supported all of his charitable work in South Africa. I try to go every year around his birthday and see him and do some event that supports either the work of the foundation or the work of some other foundation that he supports. And I think it's something that can make a real difference in Africa. Thank you.
Let's get, yeah, right there. You're right next to him. Yeah, the guy in the tie with the blue and the... Ladies, please. Not a piece of meat, he has ideas.
I'm a student coming from Afghanistan to study. I'm studying at California University of the Pacific. This is my second conference in CGIU, and I have been impressed by the commitments I see students making here, from technology to agriculture to other commitments. But I get inspired as well, and I make commitments to what I can, not to bring peace in Afghanistan, because I cannot do that. So my question is, all these commitments that people make here, they go back to their country, they have security that allows them to implement those commitments. When I make a commitment, my commitment is at risk, because it's in danger, because it's not secure. If I make a commitment to go to Kandahar or Helmand, I'm in danger of being attacked by Taliban. What could be done to bring peace in your opinion, having served as the United States president, and now with all your success in mobilizing an army of change agents to go in and do that in their countries, what could be done? Because I think the idea, my dream, and I think everyone can hear that, is that we should see on CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, news about commitments, about changing world, not war.
Well,
Nicely done.
Afghanistan is a particularly difficult case for three reasons. One, there is the question of the capacity of the government and its allies, not just the United States, but the other countries that are there, to actually create a secure environment. Second, there is the alienation caused by the widespread corruption. And third, the most productive, most likely path to a less violent future on a daily basis would be some sort of agreement between the Afghan government and the Taliban. And most people question whether that could be done without the guarantees of the Constitution for equal rights for women and girls being severely eroded. So we're in a terrible moral dilemma there. You want fewer people to die and you want to stop the violence, and you don't think the government as currently constituted will ever be able to totally defeat the Taliban and dominate the country. But if you make a deal under conditions of weakness or without guaranteed enforcement, you may be selling out the futures of countless women and girls. So that's not the answer you want. Sometimes I get to say I don't know when I don't want to say it. But that's the truth. And I think my experience has been working in other areas that were dominated by violence, nothing as bad as Afghanistan, but in different places. For example, when President Musharraf was still in office in Pakistan, and I had my differences with him, which we aired on television actually when I was president, and to his credit, with his support in a big press conference. But the Musharraf government actually invited our foundation to come and help them set up a national AIDS program and provide the medicine and the testing equipment and the training. And it was the first non-African Muslim nation, not a city, not an area, a whole nation, to ask us to come in, to say we are out of denial, we got a problem here, will you come help us? So I feel, but what we did do, and none of our people were ever hurt there or anything, we were able to negotiate basically place-by-place security arrangements with the powers that be who thought that it was worth doing. So my guess is, given the conflicts of Klan as well as the Taliban and the government, in order for you to be able to go safely to Kandahar, there's probably a deal to be cut there with somebody locally, and it would probably have to be done that way. If you had the support of the right people in the government, I think it would make a difference. If I can help you get it, I'd be glad to try. But I think that the United States has said we'd be happy to support the resumption of the talks between the Taliban and the government, but we don't want to sell out the future of every woman and every girl in Afghanistan to make a peace. It is a horrible dilemma. And I think in the meanwhile, the best someone like you can do, and I applaud you for loving your country and making commitments to help it there, and it may be that we could make a deal that would secure the safety and freedom of movement for the people involved in your commitment in the specific areas for the specific purposes you want. I have had some success in doing that in other countries, and so far, somebody promised us they'd do it, they've done it. Nobody's ever double-crossed us yet on a deal like that.
All right. Come on. Somebody give him a hard question. Come on. Yes, ma'am. Right there. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Sharice Madigan. I'm from Rochester, New York, and I was just wondering, with the economic situation as it is, it's hard enough to go to college and try to get a job when you graduate, as movements like Occupy Wall Street have highlighted. But it's even harder to graduate from college and try to start a business with humanitarian endeavors, such as all of us here are probably trying to do, at least to further our commitments. So how do you suggest that we go ahead and try to help the world while at the same time trying to keep our heads above water
I can
financially?
take this one.
Well, first,
I think you might want to host your own TV show because I found the money terrific and you have a real broad platform. So that's what I would recommend. You might want to help her in a more practical way.
well, first of all, I want to compliment you on inviting the competition. Most people don't do that. Here's my specific suggestion. And you can find this out on the internet, or you can contact my foundation and we'll give you information. There are 8 or 10 foundations in America whose specialty is funding other people's non-governmental activities. And Vital Voices could help. The Rockefeller Foundation funds sometimes new foundations. There are other people who do it. Depends on what you want to do and how you want to do it and how you want to design it. But there are foundations with a lot of money that are interested in doing this. And so I think, assuming you could find somebody who likes your idea, in this economy, it might be easier to start a business that is an NGO than to find a particular job that you find fruitful. Now, I believe once we get the direct student loan program fully implemented in America, for people who did not take bank loans over and above that, that is, that just got whatever Pell grants or other grants were available, and all their loans came through the student loan program. When that's fully implemented, and I think they're going to move it up and fully implement it next year, then from then forward, I think you will have less pressure because everybody's loan obligation per year will be tied to your income. So your loan payments will be a function of your job, so your job doesn't have to become a function of your loan payments. And this is a, in 1993, my first year as president, I passed this as an option for all the colleges. And the banks went crazy because they had guaranteed loans, you know. But a lot of the colleges took it, a lot of students took advantage of it. The students saved $9 billion in lower interest in repayment. The ones who joined it could pay back as a fixed percentage of their income, and the taxpayers saved $4 billion because when people can pay back their loans, they don't default. So when President Obama was elected, there was a Democratic Congress, and they gave him a mandatory program that just forced everybody to shift to direct student loans. But it took a few years to get implemented. When that's done, I think it will change everything. I think that a lot of young people like you will be able to say, well, you know, I always kind of wanted to teach school for a year or two, but I can't do it for life, and gosh, I've got $50,000 in student loans. It's totally irrelevant now because your loan repayment obligation will be capped as a percentage of your income. So you might say, well, I'm going to go teach on a Native American reservation or in an inner city school or do something else, to work in some other way for a couple of years just to see what it's like, and then maybe I'll go back and go into business, and you'll be able to afford to do it because you won't be bankrupted by your own loan repayment obligations. So you all remember that when you're going through this.
Right. Let's get the woman right there, standing right there. Sorry. What is it?
Hi, my name is Brittany King. I'm a graduate student from Houston, Texas. And
From Houston, Texas?
yes. And I'm also a single mother and survivor of domestic abuse, brutal domestic abuse. And I know that when you came on earlier, you said that we in this room are overachievers. But because of my past, I haven't always been that way. My first semester of college, I failed out, just completely flunked, just with everything that I was facing. Last night, a gentleman said that talent is universal, but opportunity is not. So my question to you is, how do we optimize the talent of those who don't always have the same opportunity? Someone like me who's had to fight very hard just to be standing today with everything that I've had to face. So how do we make that something that's real? This is an excellent opportunity that I sought out. My school didn't tell me about it, I just kind of went looking. So how do we make that something that's real?
Well, let me ask you something. Stand up, stand up, stand up. How did you get through it? How did you become a good student? How did you get over it? Did somebody help you? And was that somebody back in your home? Was it somebody on your college campus? Was it someone in high school? How'd you get to where you are?
I think because my daughter was so dependent on me as a single mother, looking into her face saying that we're gonna make it. Had she not been there, I may not be standing today. And I think innately I've always had this unwavering determination and resilience, but I also recognize that everybody may not have that character trait, which is why I asked that question. When I wake up every morning and I see that I still have the air to take breath, I say that I still have a purpose on this earth. But I understand that there are those who feel like there is no purpose when hope seems to elude them. But I will say that I have had people who have come alongside me and encouraged me and just told me to keep pushing. And those were people that I sought out, and some people who just kind of saw my determination and resilience who helped me. But for those who may not have that drive or that motivation, or a child looking at them saying, "Mommy, what are we going to eat tonight?" What do we do for those people?
Well, that's a great question. There's been an extraordinary amount of publicity given to the problem of abuse of children, both physical and sexual abuse, in the last several months. Not only the well-known case at Penn State, but a Major League Baseball player has just written his memoirs about his own experience. The senator from Massachusetts, Scott Brown, wrote a memoir about his own experience. Joe Torre, who coached the New York Yankees and the Los Angeles Dodgers, his whole foundation is called the Safe at Home Foundation because he was brutalized as a child until he got big enough to stop it. And I think one of the things that you could do, all of you could do, is to try to get the people who work with this to establish some kind of beachhead on every campus so that people would have someone who could help them get over this. Because one of the things you have to do is you have to get to the point where you either put it in a box somewhere or forgive somebody or go ream them out or do whatever so they don't hold you prisoner anymore. I mean, your daughter basically liberated you, your child. Is it a daughter or son? Okay, your daughter, because you had to care about her, you didn't have the option of being a prisoner to your past. Your daughter set you free. And with people who don't have children, have to have something else that will set them free. I'll tell you an interesting story. The day Nelson Mandela was released from prison, early 1991, on Sunday morning, I got Chelsea out of bed. She was somewhat younger than she is now. And I sat her up on the kitchen counter, and I turned on the television, and I said, "Chelsea, they're letting Nelson Mandela out of prison today. This may be the most important thing you ever see in terms of a political event." So he walks down this dusty road. You remember, if none of you are old enough to remember, but you may have seen the film. You should get it on the internet. It's beautiful. He walks down this dusty road in this dramatic gesture, and he gets in a little car. They open the gate, and he drives out to freedom. And before you know it, he's president after 27 years. So when Mandela and I became friends, I said, "You know, you're a great man, but you're also a canny politician. It was smart to invite your jailers to the inauguration. It was essential to invite the parties that put you in prison to be part of your government. You held the country together. But tell me the truth. And I told him about getting Chelsea up and watching him. I said, when you were walking down that road for the last time, tell the truth now. Didn't you hate their guts again? And Mandela said, well, of course I did. He said, I was full of hatred and fear. I had not been free in so long. But he said, I realized if I hated them after I got in that car and got through that gate, I would still be their prisoner. He said, and he said, and he smiled at me and says, I wanted to be free. And so I let it go. And he looked at me and said, so should you. So should everyone. In all these cases of childhood abuse, it's so caught up with things that are wrong, what shouldn't happen to people, what the power relationships are. It's just like it's so hard to let it go. But there are people who do this all the time on every continent. Think what it's like in Africa for all those kids that were turned into soldiers. Think about all the childhood soldiers that have somehow miraculously made something of their lives in the U.S. or Europe or gone back to Africa and done it. I mean, it's the cruelest of all kind of abuse, child abuse. But in the end, it's about no longer being a prisoner to it. And so you have to give people the strength of mind to look forward instead of backward. Your daughter sets you free.
Let me see if I can get someone from up in the back there. Yes, ma'am. You're standing right there in the back. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Lauren Hassick, and I'm an undergraduate at the University of Pittsburgh. All right, so we've been talking a lot about how wonderful it is that we all are getting off our butts and committing ourselves to all these wonderful goals, and we hold babies in Africa, and we spit off numbers about how well development has helped these countries. What about the negative impacts of foreign aid? We haven't said a thing about that all weekend.
She's talking about the negative impact of foreign aid. I think she's talking about people being sick of Bono. I think that's pretty much what it is. I think it's Bono. No, she's saying, do you have anything to say about, are there any negative impacts to foreign aid? And is there anything that you've seen that has gone in that has taken...
There can be negative impacts to foreign aid. There can also be negative impacts of development. Let me just mention foreign aid, if it's not held accountable, can just reinforce the status quo in a country and increase the amount of money available for corruption. One possible negative. Secondly, foreign aid can be a project that the donor feels that the country needs, that the country hasn't bought into, in which case it will be wasted money. As soon as the money runs out, the project will vanish and it won't have any lasting impact. Foreign aid can be harmful if a country sees that less than half the money appropriated is actually being spent in the country on the people because the developed countries' NGOs are getting big cuts off the top. So there are lots of problems with foreign aid, and I spend a lot of time trying to help improve its impact in countries where I don't take the money directly. Obviously, I have a conflict in the United States now, so I don't do that. But I do try to help improve the impact of American foreign aid by seeing that a higher percentage of it is actually spent in the country on the people it was intended to reach. We could, if we had a simple requirement, a requirement like the healthcare laws requirement that 85% of all the money that you pay in healthcare goes to your healthcare instead of profits or promotion, if 85% of all the foreign aid appropriated by every wealthy country in the world had to be spent on the people and through the people in the country it was designed to help in a way that was transparent, accountable, and honest, that would dramatically increase the impact of whatever dollars are appropriated by parliaments and Congress around the world. But let me also say that there can be corruption in private development too. That's the well-known resource curse. Why do so many countries with oil and minerals and metals wind up with average people poorer and the economy polluted? Because they just pay off people who want to be paid off, and they don't reinvest money in the country. One of the most rewarding things I do is work with Canadian mining companies who put money into funds in in Bolivia and Peru to reinvest some of their mining profits in the areas where the mining occurs, to diversify the economy and strengthen society so that when the mines play out, the people will be better off. Every country in the world with mineral wealth or mining wealth or oil wealth should have the money spent the way Botswana spent its diamond money. There's a reason that the per capita income in Botswana is twice that of any other country in sub-Saharan Africa, apart from the fact that it's a very small country with a lot of wealth. And that is, they put 100% of the money into a transparent trust. The money goes into a trust. And you know what the contracts are worth, and you can follow the money to see if that much money is in the trust. And then when the money is spent, it's spent to benefit the people and diversify the economy, and that's all transparent. That's the way every country should handle its resource wealth. If they did, it would be the biggest boon to Africa, and ordinary people would see their incomes rise. I go to Nigeria once a year. We mostly just have climate change projects in Nigeria. But I go there once a year to a major press event where a Nigerian press man brings in all the people from all the sectors of the economy, and then brings in people like me from outside to tell them that they should be honest and transparent because it would work better, and point out how it's working in other places. Because if Nigeria works, South Africa works, and you can avoid the worst of what's going on in the Congo and give them a responsible path forward, the rest of sub-Saharan Africa would have magnets that would guarantee much more rapid and positive growth. So there are problems with foreign aid, but there are also problems with private development, and they both need to be addressed in a way that benefit real people in the countries affected.
Right. Gentleman right there in the baseball hat, we got a, yep.
Hello, my name is Dan Chesmore, and to be honest, I'm putting a lot at risk for speaking right now, but I have to bring an issue that I feel needs to be addressed. So I'll start. Mr. President, during your presidency, you signed significant legislations such as Don't Ask, Don't Tell and the Defense of Marriage Act. After attending CGIU, there's obviously a focus on alleviating poverty and making commitments to sustainability, education, health, and development. However, I identify as being a minority because of my identification with the LGBT community. Thank you. Though campaigns such as the It Gets Better project have made considerable differences in the lives of LGBT youth, both in America and across the world, LGBT youth are still most at risk for teen suicide. What can we as students do to ensure equality and fair treatment for LGBT Americans? Also, when will this country finally rule that separate is inherently unequal when it comes to the social institution of marriage? Because I will not ask my future partner to civil union me or domestic partnership me, and I refuse to again be treated as a second-class citizen. Thank you.
Well, first of all, one of the things the answer to the gay marriage question is this. This Supreme Court is not even sure you should have to have health insurance. They're not about, I don't think, to say that you have a constitutional right to be married. They'll say it's a matter of state law. But I think we're making progress there. And my answer on the marriage issue is, I've changed my position, a lot of other people have. We got it in New York, you have to keep working, and you'll get there. Let me just say this, but since you brought it up, I thank you for doing it. I'm always curious at how selective people's memories are. The LGBT community must wonder about how I maintained such broad support in your community when I was president, since I did those two terrible things. Here's why. Number one, I did not sign Don't Ask, Don't Tell until both houses of Congress had voted by a veto-proof majority for a resolution saying if I kept trying to put gays in the military, they would go back to making it a crime. And Colin Powell came to me as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and said, if you accept this, you're beat on this other thing. If you accept this, here is how we will enforce it. No gay person will be asked about his sexual orientation. Getting gay materials, going to gay bars out of uniform, marching in gay rights parades out of uniform, none of that will be used to kick anybody out of the military. In other words, we'll let everybody alone if you agree to this. Okay? So rather than go back to what happened, I agreed to do it. And what happened? The minute he left, they broke every single commitment they made to me and started wasting money trying to kick people out. The reason I supported gays in the military in the first place was partly because in the first Gulf War, the military allowed more than 100 gay members of the service to put their lives at risk. In the first Gulf War in 1991, knowing they were gay, waited till they put their lives at risk, waited till the war was over, and then kicked them out. So it's true I did it, but if you understand all the facts and what my options are, I'm not sure I did the wrong thing. And on the DOMA bill, the whole purpose of DOMA was to keep the Congress from voting out a constitutional amendment banning gay marriage in the U.S. Constitution, which, had it gotten to the states, would almost certainly back then have secured the votes of 3/4 of the state legislatures in the country. It was a cold calculation based on we may have been wrong, but most of the leaders of the gay community and most of my congressional advisors believed that if we didn't go along with that, the Congress, the Republican Congress, would put a gay marriage ban amendment to the federal Constitution, and that they would get the votes in the House and the Senate, and they would send it to the states. So I may have been wrong, but I think under the circumstances, since we believed that would happen, it was worth it to block it, because since then, there has been steady, long progress toward recognizing gay marriage, which I support. Yes.
President Clinton, my name is Francisco Estrada. I'm from Salinas, California, which you visited while you were in office. My city is about 140,000 people, and we last year were the 6th highest city per capita in homicide rates in the entire country. We have the highest incarceration rate per county in California of locking up youth under the age of 18. So my question to you is, how do we as students and youth who are trying to break down some of these barriers and trying to reduce the youth recidivism rate and the youth incarceration rate, how do we break down some of these barriers that we confront with establishments like our local judges, our local district attorneys?
Well, let me ask you something. Why do you think the incarceration rate is so high? Why do you think the crime rate is so high? Why do you think it happens?
I think it's a two-part answer. I think one of them is because of our lack of resources in our educational system in our area, and then the other one is because our local district attorney has a "I'm going to drop the hammer, lock you up, and throw away the key" mentality.
What percentage of these kids that are incarcerated have offenses involving drugs or guns?
It's a very minimal amount. So a lot of the times that our youth is getting incarcerated is because of what some people call crimes of passage, which is maybe sometimes underage drinking, smoking marijuana, which is kind of like a life passage type of crime, I would say. I bet most...
A life passage. Let me ask you a question. Would you consider Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd a life passage crime?
Mr. Stewart, I have no idea what that is.
I am so old. This is unconscionable.
I'm guessing that was something in the 60s.
Yes. Get me my walker. I'm going to get out of here.
Let me ask you a question. When in my second term, we had a precipitous drop in not just the crime rate. Well, we had an 8-year drop in the crime rate, but we really went after juvenile offenses, tried to keep people out of prison. And one of the things we did was to appropriate enough money for after-school programs for 1.5 million young people. It's with federal money. And I gather a lot of them have been cut back now under all these financial constraints California's been under. I believe that we've got to go back to turning these schools into community centers, leave them open every night, leave them open on the weekends, offer real support to kids. And we also started something in Philadelphia that eventually we had 500,000 kids in, called Gear Up, where we would tell people in middle school they could go to college. And we would tell them, you can go to college and here's what your benefits will be. We'll promise you right now, if you do these things in school and follow this path. I think you got to figure out, look, most people don't want to fail. You know, they don't want to fail. Most people want to succeed, but they first don't think they'll be able to, so then they do dumb things. Or they don't know how to, and I don't think there's a magic elixir here. I think that you got to go to child by child by child and figure out they each need a mentor of some kind, and then we need to put them on a path to the future by the time they're 13. There aren't many probably in detention under 13. There may be some, but probably not many. And then I think somehow they have to be able to choose their schools over the streets. We've got to go back. I don't care how we find the money. We've got to find a way to go back and do what I was trying to do at the end of my second term, which is to turn all these schools into community centers. Let me just give you one example. Andre Agassi, the famous tennis player, started a school in Las Vegas, which I have been to several times. And he put it in the poorest neighborhood in Las Vegas, one of the poorest neighborhoods in all of Nevada. And it was the first school in the entire county, where Vegas is, which is, you know, half the population of the state, to receive an excellent rating from the state. And they're open all the time, every night, every weekend. All the parents, whether they're two-parent households or single working moms, they're invited to come into the schools. They give all of them computer training. They do emailing with the teachers. They give the kids something to do at night and on the weekends. In other words, the school recognizes that the families are under enormous assault, economic and otherwise, that these kids are in trouble, and they also start early preparing them either to move into a training program where they can get a decent job or go on to college. And it's made a huge difference. Now, Agassi is not one of these celebrities that has to have a charity so you can check the box and somebody else runs it. He runs that school. I mean, he has people who do that, but I mean, he's heavily involved in it and in the lives of the kids. But it's stunning what happened once they went after every one of these kids, one by one by one, and their families, one by one by one. And they made them all feel that they had a home in the school and that they were committed to their success. And somehow we have to recreate that for everybody. You know, when we leave here, the basketball games are on tonight, and bye, John. Now, I want to say this because it relates to Salinas. So, you have this, what may be a rout or maybe a fascinating game between Kentucky and Louisville. And Louisville has all these kids. There's no way in the world they should be in the Final Four. Except they got a big, tall African guy who can block shots like crazy. And they got a great point guard with lots of tats. But they didn't expect to be there. But Rick Pitino, the coach, said an interesting thing that might relate to Salinas. They said, how did you do this? These kids, they got no business being in the Final Four. You keep winning these games. And he said, everybody that plays this game wants to succeed. But some don't believe they can. So first, everybody's got to believe they can. Then it turns out they want to succeed for different reasons. Some want to make their mothers proud. Some want to make their parents proud. If the father left the home early, some want to show their daddy that they're still good. Some want to do it for their teammates. People want to succeed for different reasons. You have to convince everybody that the only way you can succeed on your own terms is if you're part of a team that's doing something bigger and better than you are. It was really smart, you know, and somehow all these kids that are getting in trouble, they drift off. Most of them are not bad kids. They get disconnected. They think that life is a dead end anyway. We got to bring them back in. And I have no better idea than what I have seen work in Vegas and several other places. You have to make the schools, the governing community institutions, and when this economy picks up again, that's the first thing that Congress ought to think about doing. You can give all the tests in the world, you can do all this other stuff, but kids have got to believe they can succeed, they have to want to succeed, then they got to be given a way to do it, and their families have to be given a place to support them. And I think putting everybody in jail is nuts. There's too many people in jail in this country, in my opinion.
Well, listen, we've been given the all clear sign. That is all the time that we have. I just wanted to very briefly state just what an honor it's been to be here and to listen to your questions. You know a lot of things, and it's always a pleasure to hear you speak. I have rarely been in a room where I felt like I would like to work for each and every one of you. You're a pretty incredible group of individuals, and I wish you the greatest success in all the commitments that you've been working on. And I want to thank President Clinton.
See you tomorrow morning.